So at the end of the session, you should have a greater appreciation of Enterprise Architect and Sparx Systems and what Sparx Systems can offer as far as business value around traceability, reuse, requirements management, model-driven development, and much more. My name's Scott Hebbard. I'm the Communications Manager here at Sparx Systems. I have over 2 decades of experience in modelling and computing, and I'm responsible for the webinar series here at Sparx Systems. So Sparx Systems is based in Creswick, Australia. Our world-class modelling tool, Enterprise Architect, was commercially released in the year 2000, has over 850,000 customers around the world, and our customers come from a wide range of different fields, including aviation, finance, healthcare, utilities, to name but a few. And we've recently released the beta of Enterprise Architect 15.1, so I encourage you to download the free trial and check it out today if you haven't already done so. So the agenda for today is we're going to start off by discussing the business value of modelling. We're going to look at some of the reasons for implementing tooling. We're going to do a demonstration of some of the benefits using Enterprise Architect. So I'll switch between a slide deck and Enterprise Architect, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A. So let's start with the problem. So recently I've attended a number of events all around the world, talking to business analysts and enterprise architects, and lots of people that are using Word or Visio or Excel to manage requirements or to look after their enterprise architecture. They come up and they know and they understand that those tools are simply not mature enough to allow the business to scale and to grow and to be able to tackle the problem. So one of the problems is that office tools are often ubiquitous, but they're really not suited for all tasks. Now, often organizations end up using Excel or some kind of word processor for requirements, but they're certainly not suitable for that task. So this creates a bit of a problem, because drawing tools like Visio, they're not suited for Enterprise Architect because the picture needs to be updated for every version of the product. The static documents become expired the moment the specifications change, and written reports and diagrams are static with absolutely no traceability. So as organizations grow and mature, a more comprehensive approach is required that scales in an appropriate manner as the business becomes more complex. And this is one of the advantages that Enterprise Architect has to offer. So forget expired reports and limited traceability and static documents, and invest in a modeling tool that can scale to meet your needs. So don't let your corporate strategy sit in a dusty filing cabinet. Create a model that everybody can read, search, and understand. So what are some of the benefits of modeling? Well, first of all, it allows you to gain an insight into your organization or system. You can understand the impact of change. It allows you to reduce and mitigate risk. It allows you to reduce complexity, because a picture, as they say, tells 1,000 words. And you also have the ability to reuse model elements. You have complete traceability all the way from a requirement through to deployment. So you can go from the strategy all the way through to deployment. It helps to improve productivity, allows you to understand the business, make better decisions, and retain knowledge. Some of the other benefits include it allows you to capture an understanding of the system, and by capturing that understanding, everybody else in the organization can understand it as well. It's certainly great for training and onboarding of new staff because they can see processes, and it gives you a clear and concise way to model and understand information. So one of the really important things is that you need the ability to communicate with your stakeholders. And Enterprise Architect also allows you to improve documentation. It helps you to decompose complex systems into meaningful chunks that are easier to understand, can improve maintenance and reduce defects. This leads us to the ability to communicate with stakeholders, and using models allows an organisation to do that in a clear and concise manner. Models are easy to understand, allows you to explore connections and relationships, to provide relevant information to the people that need it when that information is necessary. And one of the problems is if you have all of your information in Word documents, then no one can ever find the Word document. I'm sure there are many people out there that search a network and they don't know where the relevant documentation is, or the governance guidelines, or the rules or the specifications for a particular project. But if everybody has access to the model and everybody can see it, even on a mobile device or on the intranet, it means that your model is always up to date and people understand what's going on. And by having a single tool such as Enterprise Architect that has project management integrated, that has diagrams, specifications, and all of your design and planning for a project all in the one place, and that everybody can see and everybody can understand, it allows you to have much better communication with your stakeholders. So what I want to do next is I want to be able to have a look at the EA example model. Now, the EA example model is provided free with every copy of Enterprise Architect that's sold, and it's easily accessible from the help menu within Enterprise Architect. And the reason I want to show you the EA example model is it just gives you a nice way of seeing some practical examples that show you some of the business benefits that EA can offer. So I've talked about it at a high level, but I want to give you a practical demonstration. So simply select Help, and from the drop-down menu, say Open the Example Model. One of the great things is that this does, as I said, it ships with every copy of Enterprise Architect, so all the models that I'm showing you in this next segment will be all available to you from the trial and from Enterprise Architect if and when you purchase it. So there's a section called Business Modeling, and you can see one of the first things that I talked about in the description of the webinar is about traceability. And Enterprise Architect offers the ability to trace from a requirement through to a use case, through to a class and deployment. This traceability is quite powerful. So what you see on screen is a traceability diagram. And what I like about it is that you can trace all the way from a high-level strategy down to class or a code level. And all those relationships can be modeled and mapped and designed so people can understand how strategy is implemented. And there's also a number of tools that allow you to get an instant understanding of traceability and impact analysis. So I brought up the traceability window on the right hand side, and if I select requirement number 11, manage user accounts, I can see that that is composed of add users and a number of different elements, and I can drill down and I can very quickly find any of these elements in a diagram, and I can very quickly understand the relationship between any element and any other element within a model. Now, Enterprise Architect can not only do requirements, but you can do data modeling, you can do software engineering, you can do systems modeling, enterprise architecture, simulation, and lots of other items. If we have a look at some of the architectural frameworks that are available, you can see that we can look at stakeholder motivation. We can look at things as simple as an organizational chart, so you can see how an executive manager might be interacting with other people. You can look at business capabilities, and you can model them within Enterprise Architect. And once again, one of the advantages of all of these approaches, whether it be roadmaps or heat maps or stakeholder diagrams, is that you have complete traceability and all of these elements are integrated. Now, I wanted to go through and quickly show some of the breadth that's available. And all of these models are available for free in the Enterprise Architect example model. Now, why does this add business value to you as a customer? Well, you can get those elements, you can copy them, you can modify them, you can edit them in your own projects to help get you up and running really quickly. So you have requirements, you have use cases, you have class diagrams, you have data models, frameworks, structures, heat maps, all available, all for free. And one of the other great things that Enterprise Architect has to offer is that using the model wizard, there are thousands of ready-made templates that can get you up and running so that you can model your projects quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly bring up the Sparx Systems website here, and you can see that Enterprise Architect on the page, it shows you a number of diagrams. It shows how you can use Enterprise Architect to manage software, to build requirements, to show how a person or a customer interacts with a system. You can model business processes. You can drill down into those business processes and simulate those processes to improve them. You can build Archimate diagrams and you can model how your organizations work. You can design wireframes to see how your interfaces work and interact with other systems, and you can use those interfaces to elicit requirements. You can manage projects using Kanban diagrams. You have traceability diagrams and a relationship matrix so you can identify any gaps in your models and your designs. You can model a logical database, a class diagram, databases, do code engineering, reverse engineering, and undertake visual execution analysis. You can also profile and understand how your code works. And finally, you can create a software release roadmap or a roadmap for how your organization might use some of these tools. So what I want to do is just show you very quickly at a high level how Enterprise Architect can be used to offer business value and how modeling is much richer and provides much more capabilities than just an Excel spreadsheet. If you have requirements in an Excel spreadsheet, then you simply won't be able to have the traceability to be able to link that one requirement to use cases, to strategy, to staff, to processes, and some of the other aspects that I've shown you today. From the Enterprise Architect, so from the Sparx Systems website, there's the Enterprise Architect Reviewer's Guide. I recommend that you also download that if you're new to the product so that you can dig into some of the features of the product and see how that might be able to also provide you with some additional business value. So let's have a look at some of the benefits of Enterprise Architect. So one of the problems with Office tools is that they're often out of date the moment they're published. The documents, the printed documents are hard to distribute, they're static. Drawing is static and it's often confined to a single diagram. So any changes require a new diagram. So what does Enterprise Architect offer? Well, it allows you to manage and gather requirements and model software and systems, and allows you to model and analyze business processes and build, design behavioral models using UML. So Enterprise Architect is based on a collaborative tool, and it allows you to build and design UML models, SysML models, and business process models that can help you understand how an organization works. So I mentioned collaboration before. Well, one of the great things is that Enterprise Architect is based around collaboration and team development. So some of the ways that this is offered is model mail ships with every copy of Enterprise Architect, which means you can send a message to anyone in your team. You can discuss at an element level what's going on within a project. Everybody can see the diagram, so you can send a link to a diagram or a team review or a particular model element. You can also collaborate by assigning resources and by integrating your project management tools in with your overall project. As I mentioned before, you have traceability from requirements all the way through to deployment. You can model any system from a web application or a C# application through to an embedded system, and you can even model your enterprise architecture. And Enterprise Architect supports a number of different standards, whether it be Archimate or TOGAF, and a number of different standards that are supported all around the world. So with Enterprise Architect being standards based, it also means that you can rely on those standards and see those standards implemented within the tool. There's extensive project management support. So from being able to assign resources to being able to look at a Gantt chart and a heat map. And you also have the ability to do test management and code engineering. So Enterprise Architect offers lots of tools and features that are not necessarily available in a traditional office environment. So let's have a look at one classic example, which is managing requirements. Now, in a traditional sense, when people manage requirements offline, often that means writing on a whiteboard or jotting down notes on post-it notes and napkins and notepads, and then compiling them into a Word document. Some organizations, when they're first getting started in software development or systems development, because the tools that are at hand, such as Word and Excel or LibreOffice or other kind of office productivity tools, people use those products in order to gather requirements. There are other people that use tools like Visio to create single diagrams. Now, one of the disadvantages of this approach is that every time the software changes or when things are modified, then you need to update all of those diagrams. And there are other people that use tools like Jira to maintain the requirements. One of the advantages of using Sparx Systems Enterprise Architect is that it allows you to add those Word and Excel documents directly into the model repository so everybody can see them and everybody can have access to them. You can leverage those collaboration and communication tools in order to interact with them. But when you make a change to an element on a diagram, if that element appears in 500 diagrams, then that element is updated in all of those 500 diagrams. So you're not creating a drawing, you are modeling, and that model can have representations of a model element seen in lots and lots of different places. So requirements gathering in a traditional sense often uses this kind of approach where a whole lot of people discuss what they want, what they need. It gets written on a whiteboard. But as we all know, one of the problems with a whiteboard approach is at 6 p.m. they all get wiped and some of that information can be lost forever. People often will use tools like post-it notes and whiteboards and Word documents because they're ubiquitous and available. But the message I'm trying to get across in this webinar is just because they are ready and available doesn't mean that they're the best fit for purpose. And sometimes people say, oh, look, I can put things in different columns. Well, you can build those Kanban diagrams within Enterprise Architect. So here's a simple example where we have a manage users requirement diagram. Now, when I press N on the keyboard, it will automatically bring up the notes for any requirement. there's a detailed set of properties from alias, stereotype, keywords, version, and you'll note that when I change a status, the color of the requirement automatically changes on screen so that there's a visual identification of whether the status is mandatory or validated, and you can create your own statuses as well. For people that really like to see things in a list view, I can switch to a list view, or alternatively, I can switch to a Gantt view, and this is where all of the resources have been assigned to those individual requirements, and there's a Gantt view on screen so I can see which tasks are running late and who's been assigned to which task. I can also look at a specification view, and I can quickly make changes to status, difficulty, priority, stereotype, and I can add new elements with a single button click. So while we have the power of a visual diagram approach, there's also a lot more power under the hood, and you can switch and change views so that if the people that are entering the requirements much prefer a text-based approach, then they can still use that text-based approach. Then you can switch back to the diagram view and add your relationships and your connectors so that you can see how elements are connected. So the important thing is to have the right tool for the task at hand. So it allows you to work as you always have done, will allow you to create understandable specifications, will empower you to drive downstream activities, make subsequent projects faster, and retain a history of decisions and implementations, so that when you do make decisions throughout a project, they're recorded in the model repository and everybody can understand why those decisions have been made. So if you really do like using post-it notes, then you can replicate that within Enterprise Architect. If you really do like a Kanban approach and the ability to pick up elements and move them across the whiteboard so you can see how they transition through a project, then you can create a Kanban diagram within Enterprise Architect and model all of those elements here. Enterprise Architect allows you to, so if you really like using Excel and using a text-based approach for data entry, then we support that, and you can switch to a specification view to add elements quickly and easily like you always have. The next thing I want to talk about is structured scenarios, where you can go from the text that may be stored in a traditional Office document and move it to a model-based approach. So here we have a very simple user story for using an ATM. And this is what I have lots of customers that have approached me at events recently that says, I really want to move to a more mature approach using Enterprise Architect, but unfortunately we've got 1,000 user stories and they're all sitting in Word documents and I don't want to throw them away. And if that's the case, then you can use structured scenarios to bring those user stories into your model repository, and hopefully I can demonstrate how you can get some greater business value out of that. So on the left you can see the ATM user story, and there's a description. The system displays a welcome screen, and by simply copying this text, Enterprise Architect will automatically generate out the structured specification. Every sentence will be converted into a text link, and then you can see you can add uses and results and much more. From that structured scenario, you can generate activity diagrams, sequence diagrams. It makes it easier to follow and allows you to visually follow the process, identify any bottlenecks. It's repeatable, and it allows you to ensure that you can finish the process and there's no endless loops. You can get rid of logical errors, and you can try and do much more than you might do using text alone. So you take the text, you import it into Enterprise Architect, and then you can use a model-driven approach to automatically generate an activity diagram and a sequence diagram, such as one on screen. So this allows you to identify the actors of the system and how they interact with system elements, allows you to capture the interaction between the objects in the context of a collaboration, and provides far more information than you'd get from simply looking at a slab of text itself. From the structured scenarios, you can then take all of those model elements and you can view them in a Gantt chart. You can assign resources so members of the team know which requirements they're working on, and can allow you to build up from there. Now, going back to the title of the webinar is, what's the business value of doing this? Well, you're taking the text, which you've already invested your time, effort, and energy in, but you're getting far more value from that text than you would in a word processor document. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to step through the process. So let's imagine that you are working for a consultancy that is working with a local airport, and they have a user story that's been written. Now, I happen to be using LibreOffice, but it might be Word, or it might be some text in Excel. And we have this description here about how to interact with a check-in kiosk at an airport, and we want to develop that into a activity diagram, a sequence diagram, and a use case, and make more out of it than the text on screen. So I have the text here, and we're looking at interacting with the kiosk, and you can see that each sentence says either what the customer does or what the computer does. Now, traditionally, I could print this out and hand it out to the BAs and get them to analyze it. But what we're going to do is we're going to get greater business value by copying all of this information to the clipboard and then bringing it into Enterprise Architect. So here we have a use case and we have check-in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and bring up the properties for this element, go to scenarios, and I'm just going to paste in that text from the Word document. So I've done a simple copy and paste, and then I'll highlight it, and I'm going to automatically create structure from the notes based on a sentence delimited approach. And now you can see that I have a basic path that's been created, and that's automatically available here in my structured scenario editor. Now, not only does it clearly delineate which steps are generated by the customer and by the computer, but I can now add additional elements such as uses and states and results to build on this information. So when the customer first walks up and is touching the screen, the state of that screen is active. When they enter their frequent flyer number, then that state changes to search the database. When the computer kiosk confirms the flight information, the state becomes a confirmation state. And each of these states can then be linked to a series of requirements that indicate, once confirmation's happened, what that actually means. Once a boarding pass is printed, then the flight database will be updated accordingly. So you can add uses, results, and states. You can add alternative paths, and you can create a really detailed set of scenarios. So here I'm adding an alternate path for, what if no flight is listed? And I can go through and add steps there once again, and I can copy and paste and automatically generate that scenario from plain text. Because of a model-driven approach, once you've done this, I can, with one click, automatically generate an activity diagram. I can automatically generate a state diagram. So you can see active, search DB, boarding pass, and I can generate test cases and use cases. And the great thing about being model-based information, if I automatically change search database to search web cloud and I make a change, I can then generate out a new state diagram. I can overwrite the existing diagram, and you can see that that state is automatically updated. So you make a change to the model, and instead of having to print out new diagrams, it automatically updates that element right throughout the model. So what I wanted to show here very quickly is how, by taking the text that you've written in a traditional environment and bringing it into Enterprise Architect, you can very quickly, and that was like a 2-minute demo, I was able to get an activity diagram, a sequence diagram, a state diagram automatically generated from that text. And using model-driven development, I was able to empower downstream activities and create far more information than what was available in the traditional Office document approach. And whenever changes were made to that model, those changes would appear throughout the document. I also had traceability, so I would be able to trace each of those states to requirements or business rules or guidelines, and the information in that user story was contained in a use case, and that use case could then be connected to guidelines for how the airport should be run. So I was able to get traceability, impact analysis. I was able to create accurate changes, and those changes would automatically be reflected in the model. I could gain insights into the development process, and I got to make the most of model-driven development. So traceability in diagrams can be handcrafted, where you can build a specific diagram, and you can go from an org chart to requirements to use cases to processes, all the way through to documentation or code. In addition to that, I can go from strategy down to code. And you can build this either manually, or you can get any element in your model, drag it on a diagram, insert related elements, and it will build this diagram for you. I have the traceability view, which allows you to quickly drill down, so you can follow a path all the way from strategy down to implementation. So executive management uses requirement number 11, which is manage user accounts, use views account details. This is an example where I've right-clicked and I've done insert related elements, so I can automatically see the impact of making a change to a requirement and what that will have across the overall organization. Now, with Enterprise Architect, we can not only see things at a use case level, but we can see, so here for our airport, we have our digital transformation strategy, and we can connect that to the CFO, the CEO, and we can understand the impact that strategy has on different individuals, and this can be modeled. If I want to quickly see, if we make a change to this strategy, what impact that's going to have to our project, then I can use the insert related elements item. I can select incoming, outgoing, so I can specify the link direction. I can say how many levels deep of a relationship I want to look at. I can select the different connector types that I'd like to investigate. And then all I have to do is click OK, and Enterprise Architect will automatically generate that diagram for me. So now I can see that if I change the digital transformation strategy for the airport, then it's going to impact machine learning and passenger gate and security program and our terrorism project. It's going to impact our data and security policies. There's a couple of states here that's going to be impacted. And once again, each of these elements, I can then bring up the traceability window and drill down further to see how this is going to impact our project. So there's quite a great deal of flexibility and power and influence, and I can right click and view these elements in other diagrams to see what other impacts this has throughout the organization. So what I wanted to try and get across is that Enterprise Architect gives you a great deal of power with respect to traceability and impact analysis, far more than having something sitting in a dusty old filing cabinet that people don't read, that's not connected to other aspects of the organization, and that doesn't give you a comprehensive sense of how an enterprise works. And by modeling it in Enterprise Architect, you can see that I can go from a high-level digital transformation strategy for an airport, and I can drill down to, some of the aspects around, machine learning or the security program, and I can find out more. So I've talked a little bit about traceability. So the next thing I want to look at is model reuse. And one of the benefits of using Enterprise Architect is that you never have to create the same requirement again. You can build up a library, and once you have that library, you can use it in new projects. So if you've spent 3 months developing a detailed set of requirements, you can simply copy them and paste them in a new project. You can share them, you can use them. So, for example, in the EA example model that I showed at the beginning, we've got a whole great specification that details all of the servers within our head office. Now, the next time we develop a project, these servers and this deployment diagram has not changed, so we want to be able to reuse that in a new project. So I can simply right-click on that package, go to copy and paste, and I can copy the entire structure for duplication to the clipboard. So I've now copied all of my head office deployment diagrams within a single click. Now I'm starting a new project at the airport and I want to be able to replicate all of that technology. So I go down and I create a new package and I create a deployment package. But rather than spending another 2 months rebuilding all of that work, I can simply right click, go down to copy and paste, and I can paste that entire structure into my new project, saving months of work. And then all of these diagrams are available to me within an instant, and I can open up the deployment diagrams and view them in my new project, and they're ready for reuse, and I can connect them to other elements within a project. Now I happen to use the EA example model because you can do the same thing and copy them into your project and adapt them and modify them so that they suit your particular needs. But this is very, very common for organizations. And then the great thing is within a few clicks, I can then link these new deployment diagrams to other elements within my existing project. So reuse, copy and paste is one thing, but we also, within Enterprise Architect 15.1, there's a brand new capability for fast model transfer. So if I just do a search for transfer, we now can export a complete project using native XML. And one of the advantages of doing this is not only can you move projects between file-based approaches, but you can also export it and import it directly to a cloud model as well. So this is in real time, so you can see the export's complete, and the entire model took maybe 10 seconds. And here's all the XML files that have been generated to the desktop based on that approach. And then, of course, I can start a new project and I can import all of those files and start again. So even though I've shown that you can reuse the requirements, the user stories, the text in your Word document, and you can bring that into Enterprise Architect. Not only that, but using native XML transfer and copy and paste, you can take entire segments of your model, repurpose them, reuse them, and always get the benefit of reuse with every new project that you start within Enterprise Architect. And so if you spend time modeling and designing systems that are not going to change, then you can reuse them time and time again on every project. And this can be quite beneficial. So once again, in the EA example model, we have a number of different tools that are ready and available for you to use. Now, just while I have a few seconds, there's a question here from Robert that says, when you copy and paste across models, what does it do with the GUID? So you can keep the GUIDs from the old system, or you can generate new GUIDs if you like, Robert. So you can see when I right-clicked and selected copy, I can duplicate the full structure and it can maintain the GUIDs, or you can reset them. So thank you for the question. There was a question from Rudolph talking about the 15.1 beta. So yes, that was released this week. And I will say that it will take a little bit of time and will be in 2020 Q1 before that final version will be released. But I encourage you to take a look at the 15.1 beta if you haven't seen it yet. So the next thing in the description that I wanted to talk about was decision making, and talking about how Enterprise Architect can be used to help make decisions. So this is an example where Enterprise Architect is being used to view an enterprise strategy to see how a passenger interacts with the airport in order to have an enjoyable travel experience. Now I'm using filters and layers is a new feature that's been introduced with Enterprise Architect 15.1, but filters have been around for quite some time. It allows you to bring your data to life, so I can show all elements that are passenger. I can look at all aspects of a diagram that are version 2. So I can compare version 1 and version 2. So I can compare as is and to be models all on a single diagram by just applying some simple filters. If I select board aircraft, you can see that's currently version 1. If I set that to version 2, then I apply that filter and I can see all elements on a diagram that are now version 2. And I can use fade or hide or grayscale to present that in a way that is appropriate for the team and allows you to focus your attention on specific aspects of a diagram so that you can help tell a story. And one of the great things about Enterprise Architect is it allows you to bring your data to life and tell a story and help stakeholders understand how to interact with information in a far more powerful way than they might be able to do with a traditional slab of text. And a diagram helps bring this information so that you can see a passenger desires a expeditious and enjoyable travel experience, and in order to do that, they need to arrive at the airport, check in for the flight, get to the gate, prepare for boarding, board the aircraft, begin a flight, and things need to happen in a certain area. We had a look at our digital transformation approach before, and we need to be able to understand the relationships. So, terminal operations funds the digital transformation, but the digital transformation can help achieve things such as growing revenue, improving passenger experience, and improving safety. We need to understand the impact of your decisions, because if you make a change to the digital transformation process, then that's going to impact lots of aspects of the operation of the airport. And you'll need to be able to switch so that you can see what impact that might have on, security monitoring and flight operations. And some of these things are available via heat maps and via other diagrams. So Enterprise Architect allows you to make those decisions because you can see those relationships. Enterprise Architect also allows you to see what role do staff have in implementing this strategy, who's responsible. Now, we showed before that you can assign resources, but you can even draw these diagrams such as this so you can see that, transport logistics and transport manager is responsible for everybody arriving at the airport. Flight operations is responsible for beginning the flight. And the gate agent is responsible for boarding the aircraft and preparing for boarding. You'll note before when I applied that filter again, even though I made a change on a separate diagram, because that element has been reused in the diagram, the filter still applies. And that goes back to something I said earlier in the webinar, that if you make a change to an element, then that change can be automatically updated to 500 or 600 diagrams throughout your organization. So one change can have a significant impact. Where if you're using an Excel spreadsheet or an Office document, you need to then go and update hundreds of diagrams in your report, and you need to make changes. And so those static documents become very dated very, very quickly. We have our use case, so you can understand how customers and stakeholders interact with systems within the airport. We looked at our structured scenarios and was able to use model-driven development so that that particular use case is associated with the customer. But we saw that we were able to create activity diagrams and sequence diagrams and much, much more. And we can drill down into all of that. You can make decisions to deliver strategic outcomes. So here, the executive team desires to improve stakeholder value, and we do this with a variety of techniques, including strategy at rest and strategy at motion. You can then map all of those strategic outcomes in a single diagram. So in order to analyze, you need to do a range of different items. You can build flowcharts. So here we've created a flowchart for how people check in their luggage and how that luggage is screened. You can build a strategy map so that you can assign responsibility, and you can see that the CFO is responsible for growing revenue, where the CEO is responsible for safety, the Chief Operations Officer is responsible for improving the passenger experience, and the Chief Experience Officer is responsible for the travel experience. And you can also create and build user stories and build them within Enterprise Architect. Now, keeping in mind that all of these aspects and these model elements, be it a state machine or a user story or a sequence diagram, you can model state transitions, you can understand message sequences. All of these things help stakeholders make decisions. There's a new feature in Enterprise Architect 15.1 where you can click on the eye to preview a diagram that's in a higher level model, and so I've just showcased that there. But you can model business processes, you can model context diagrams, you can create a Kanban diagram and a heat map, so that you can instantly see through dialogues and through color how a model is impacted. So in today's webinar, what I wanted to do was to be able to show you traceability, how Enterprise Architect can help with decision making, how it can help with reuse, and how it can be used to add business value in a far more powerful and comprehensive way than spreadsheets and static Visio diagrams and other traditional Office tools. And while many of those tools are used because they're ubiquitous and many organizations have them, I wanted to step through that process and give you some real demonstrations of Enterprise Architect and how it can be implemented in EA. So we might go now to questions. And I'll answer a few questions to wrap up. So there's a few questions about the Enterprise Architect 15 beta. So what I might do is I'll just bring up the website so I can answer those questions. So a few people have asked, how can you get access to it? So if I simply go to sparxsystems.com, you can see that on the homepage, there's a link to the beta version there, and you can download the beta, and it's only available for registered users. So there's a few people that had questions about that, and you can download the beta and test that there. The few people that were asking about requirements traceability and insert related elements. So if you select any element on a diagram, you can right click and use the context menu to insert related elements. It's a feature within Enterprise Architect, and it brings up the dialog, and it will automatically generate that diagram for you. There's a question here saying you mentioned accessing information on multiple devices. Can documents only be edited on the desktop of Enterprise Architect, and can models be edited online as well? So Sparx Systems has a Pro Cloud server, and the Pro Cloud server allows you to be able to view your models on a handheld device, anything with internet access. So being able to share and distribute those models in the palm of your hands is certainly possible. Enterprise Architect, which is the modeling tool, is actually used for establishing the relationships and being able to create those connections. With the Pro Cloud server, you are able to add comments. You can create requirements online, but the modeling itself does have to be done within Enterprise Architect. So Carl has a question saying, in Enterprise Architect, what are the options for linking requirements to use cases and then via models? And basically, you can use a quick linker. You can drag a requirement and a use case on a diagram. You can establish a link by simply drawing a connection between those two elements, and then they are linked within the model. You can also use a relationship matrix in order to identify any gaps between your requirements and use cases, and you can right click any of those gaps and you can create relationships. So you can do it using a diagrammatic approach. You can use it using a relationship matrix within Enterprise Architect, and there are a number of different ways that you can establish those connections between your requirements and your use cases and to see them within the model. There's a question from Lawrence about version and variant management. So yes, Enterprise Architect does support version control, and you can manage version control using Enterprise Architect. There's a few other things. So I am conscious of the time. So there are probably a few more questions coming in, but we'll try and take some of them offline, and I'll answer them at another time. I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. It's been great to showcase Enterprise Architect and to highlight some of the business value. I wanted to point out that from the website, if you have a look at the demo videos and the webinar library, usually within a week or so, the webinars are published here on the Sparx Systems website. So if you'd like to look at any of our previous webinars, they are listed on our website. And We also have the Sparx Systems YouTube site. So if you would like to view them on other sites, you can very quickly go to the Sparx Systems YouTube site and view some of our videos there as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time and for their support and for watching the webinar today. I really hope you got something out of it and can see how Enterprise Architect can offer business value with requirements management, with modeling, with design, with reuse, with traceability. And this webinar came about because I was speaking to lots of people at events, and they said, can you show me how Enterprise Architect is better than Word and Visio and Excel, and how it offers traceability. And having had the question asked and answered a number of times, I thought I'd create a webinar to bring it all together. As always, if you have any suggestions or ideas that you'd like to see in the future, please email webinar@sparxsystems.com. My name's Scott Hebbard from Sparx Systems. It's been a pleasure to present to you today. I look forward to seeing you in 2020, where I will undoubtedly be presenting on some of the new features within Enterprise Architect 15.1, and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for your attendance, and have a happy new year. Have a great festive season, and look forward to seeing everyone again for more webinars in 2020. So thank you very much.